The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete platform of Austin's Union Station as commuters hurried past with their coffee cups and smartphones, each lost in their own world of deadlines and obligations. The November air carried a crisp bite that reminded everyone winter was approaching, even in Texas. Samuel Mitchell sat on his worn wooden stool in the corner near the information booth, his weathered hands wrapped around a dented harmonica that had seen more miles than most people's cars. At 68, Sam's face told stories of places most folks only saw in movies. The jungles of Vietnam, the dusty roads of 3 decades spent traveling from town to town, playing music wherever someone would listen. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, a habit from his military days that he'd never quite shaken, and his flannel shirt was clean but faded from countless washings at laundromats across America. The cardboard sign beside his open guitar case read simply, "Vietnam Veteran, Music for Hope," in careful handwriting that spoke of a man who still believed in dignity despite his circumstances. Sam had been coming to this spot for 3 months now, ever since he'd arrived in Austin with nothing but his harmonica, a small backpack, and $73 to his name. The station manager, Maria Rodriguez, had initially been skeptical about letting him stay, but something about his quiet respectfulness and the way he played, not aggressively seeking attention, but simply sharing his music, had won her over. "Morning, Sam," Maria called out as she made her rounds, checking the departure boards and ensuring everything was running smoothly for the morning rush. "Morning, Maria," Sam replied with a gentle smile, his voice carrying the slight rasp of a man who'd spent years breathing in dust and exhaust fumes on the road. "How's little Carlos doing with his piano lessons?" Maria's face lit up. It never ceased to amaze her how Sam remembered every detail about the people around him, even though dozens of strangers passed by him every day. "He's getting better. Says he wants to learn that song you taught him, the one about the railroad man." Sam chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to echo slightly in the high-ceilinged station. "Tell him to keep practicing those scales. The fancy stuff comes after you master the basics." As Maria continued her rounds, Sam lifted the harmonica to his lips and began to play a slow, mournful melody that seemed to capture the essence of early morning longing. The notes drifted through the station like morning mist, causing a few commuters to slow their pace, some dropping coins into his case without making eye contact, others offering brief nods of acknowledgement. There was something about Sam's music that cut through the usual urban noise. The rumble of trains, the chatter of voices, the constant hum of air conditioning and announcements. His harmonica spoke of wide, open spaces, of campfires under starlit skies, of losses too deep for words, but somehow perfect for music. Dr. Jennifer Thompson, a psychology professor at the University of Texas, had become one of Sam's regular listeners during her Tuesday and Thursday commutes. She'd been studying the therapeutic effects of music for her research, but listening to Sam play had taught her more about music's healing power than any academic paper ever could. "He's been through something," she'd confided to her colleague, Dr. Michael Chen, after her first week of listening to Sam's music. "You can hear it in the way he plays. There's pain there, but also resilience. It's like he's processing decades of experience through that harmonica." This particular morning, as Sam played a gentle version of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, a song that always reminded him of his late wife, Margaret, he noticed an unusual commotion near the main entrance. A small group of people had gathered, and he could hear the excited whispers that usually meant someone famous had arrived. Sam had seen celebrities before during his years on the road: musicians, actors, politicians making campaign stops. He'd learned that famous folks were just people dealing with the same hopes and fears as everyone else, just with more people watching. So when he saw the familiar figure in the black cowboy hat, and weathered face walking through the crowd, he didn't stop playing. He simply continued his music, letting the notes flow as naturally as breathing. The legendary Willie Nelson moved through the station with the easy grace of someone who'd spent decades navigating crowds. At 88, he still carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd earned his place in American music history through talent, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to authenticity. Willie was in Austin for a recording session at his Pedernales studio, but his train had been delayed, leaving him with an unexpected hour to kill. Unlike many celebrities who might retreat to a private lounge, Willie had always preferred being among regular people. Some of his best songs had come from conversations with strangers in places exactly like this. As he walked past the shops and restaurants in the station, the sound of the harmonica caught his attention. There was something familiar about the melody, but more than that, there was something honest about the way it was being played. Willie had heard thousands of musicians over the years, and he could always tell the difference between someone playing for show and someone playing from the soul. He followed the sound until he spotted Sam in his corner, eyes closed as he played, completely absorbed in the music. Willie recognized the song. It was one of his own compositions, but played with a rawness and vulnerability that made it sound like it was being born for the first time. Willie found himself slowing down, then stopping completely, just listening. Around him, other people began to notice his presence, but he held up a gentle hand, asking without words for them to let him simply enjoy the music. Sam's version of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain built to a crescendo that seemed to capture all the loneliness of late-night truck stops and empty highways, then slowly faded to a whisper that spoke of acceptance and peace found in unexpected places. When the last note drifted away, Willie found himself applauding softly. The sound of applause caused Sam to open his eyes, and for a moment, the two musicians looked at each other across the busy station. Sam's expression showed no recognition. He knew the face was familiar, but couldn't quite place it. Willie smiled, the same warm smile that had graced album covers for half a century. "That was beautiful," Willie said, his distinctive voice carrying clearly despite the ambient noise of the station. "You play that song like you wrote it yourself." Sam lowered his harmonica and studied the man in front of him. There was something about his presence that commanded attention without demanding it, a quality Sam had learned to recognize in natural leaders during his military service. "Thank you," Sam replied. "It's a good song. The man who wrote it understands something about loss and finding your way through it." Willie's smile widened. He was always curious about how people interpreted his music, especially people who seemed to have lived the experiences his songs described. "You mind if I ask where you learned to play like that? That's not something you pick up from a book." Sam's weathered hands turned the harmonica over slowly, a gesture Willie recognized as the way musicians touched their instruments when they were thinking about the music inside them. "Vietnam, mostly," Sam said quietly. "Had a buddy who played guitar. He taught me that music could take you somewhere else, when where you were wasn't somewhere you wanted to be." The simple statement hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than 1,000 explanations could have managed. Willie nodded, understanding immediately. He'd written songs about Vietnam, about the young men who'd gone away, and the different people who'd come back, but he'd never served himself. He had deep respect for those who had. "That buddy still around?" Willie asked gently. Sam shook his head. "Lost him over there. But the music stayed with me." For a moment, neither man spoke. Around them, the station continued its busy rhythm, but in their small corner, time seemed to slow down. Willie had spent his career writing about moments like this, the unexpected connections that happen between strangers who recognize something in each other. "I'm Willie," he said, extending his hand. Sam reached out and shook it, noting the calluses that spoke of decades spent playing guitar. Sam Mitchell. Pleasure to meet you, Willie. Willie was about to say more when the announcement echoed through the station. All aboard for the 9:15 to San Antonio, now boarding at Platform 3. That's my train, Willie said with a note of regret in his voice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Listen, Sam, I'm recording here in town for the next few days. If you're interested, I'd love to have you come by the studio. We could play some music together. Sam looked at the card, then back at Willie. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not really a studio musician. This is more my speed, he said, gesturing to his corner of the station. Willie understood. He'd met many musicians over the years who preferred the intimacy of small venues or street performances to the sometimes sterile environment of recording studios. But there was something about Sam's playing that made him want to explore it further. No pressure, Willie said. But if you change your mind, that's my personal number. Sometimes the best music happens when you're not trying to make it perfect for anyone but yourself. Sam tucked the card into his shirt pocket. Thank you, Willie. That means a lot coming from a fellow musician. Willie started to walk away, then turned back. Sam, that song you were playing when I walked up, you made it yours. That's the mark of a true musician. As Willie disappeared into the crowd heading toward Platform 3, Sam sat back on his stool, still processing the encounter. He'd met hundreds of people in his travels, but there had been something different about Willie, an authenticity that matched his music. Maria Rodriguez appeared at his side, her eyes wide with excitement. Sam, do you know who that was? Sam looked at the business card in his hands, reading it for the first time. Willie Nelson, musician, Pedernales Studio, Austin, Texas. Willie Nelson, Sam said slowly, the name connecting to memories of songs played on radio stations across America, of music that had provided soundtrack to decades of American life. The Willie Nelson, Maria confirmed. And he was listening to you play. He gave you his card. Sam looked toward Platform 3, where Willie had disappeared, then back at the card. I'll be damned, he said quietly. As the morning progressed and the commuter rush began to thin out, Sam found himself thinking about the encounter. He'd always been a man who believed in taking life as it came, without expecting too much or getting disappointed when things didn't work out. But something about meeting Willie had stirred something in him that he'd thought was long buried, a sense of possibility. Dr. Thompson appeared for her usual Tuesday commute, and as she dropped her regular dollar into Sam's case, she noticed something different about his demeanor. You seem lighter today, Sam, she observed. Something good happen? Sam smiled, still holding Willie's card. You know, Dr. Thompson, I think maybe it did. Sometimes life surprises you right when you've stopped expecting it to. As she walked away to catch her train, Sam lifted his harmonica again and began to play. But this time, instead of the mournful melodies that usually started his day, he found himself playing something hopeful, something that spoke of new beginnings and unexpected friendships. The music drifted through Union Station, carrying with it the promise that sometimes, when you least expect it, the world reaches out and reminds you that your story isn't over yet. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of Union Station, casting geometric patterns across the floor where Sam Mitchell sat with his harmonica. The lunch rush had come and gone, leaving the station in that peaceful lull that occurred between the morning commuters and the evening travelers. Sam had been playing for nearly 5 hours, his usual repertoire of classic country and folk songs mixed with melodies he'd picked up during his years of wandering. But his mind kept drifting back to his morning encounter with Willie Nelson. He'd tucked the business card safely in his wallet, but he could feel its presence like a small weight against his chest. Mr. Sam. The excited voice belonged to Carlos Rodriguez, Maria's 8-year-old son, who had convinced his mother to bring him to the station during her afternoon shift. Carlos had become fascinated with Sam's music over the past few weeks, often sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the musician's stool, listening with the intense concentration that only children could manage. "Hey there, Carlos," Sam said, lowering his harmonica with a smile. "How'd those piano lessons go today?" "I learned a new song," Carlos announced proudly. "Want to hear it?" Before Sam could respond, the boy began humming a melody that Sam recognized as Für Elise, though Carlos's version had a distinctly more enthusiastic tempo than Beethoven had probably intended. "That's beautiful, son," Sam said genuinely. "You keep practicing like that, and you're going to be playing Carnegie Hall someday." Carlos beamed at the praise, then settled into his usual spot on the floor. "Mom says a famous person came to hear you play this morning. Is that true?" Sam glanced over at Maria, who was restocking brochures at the information desk while keeping one eye on her son. Over the past 3 months, Sam had become something of an unofficial grandfather figure to Carlos, and Maria had grown comfortable with their friendship. "Well," Sam said, choosing his words carefully, "I met a fellow musician, someone who's been playing music a lot longer than I have." "Was he good?" Carlos asked, with the straightforward curiosity of childhood. Sam chuckled. "Yeah, Carlos. He was good. Real good." What Sam didn't tell the boy was that he'd spent much of the afternoon thinking about Willie Nelson's music, remembering songs he'd heard on the radio during his travels. Songs like "On the Road Again" had provided soundtrack to countless miles of highway, while "Always on My Mind" had helped him through some of the loneliest nights after Margaret passed away. Margaret. Even now, 3 years after her death, Sam could feel her presence in moments like these. She would have been excited about his meeting with Willie, probably would have insisted he call the number on the card immediately. "Samuel Mitchell," she would have said, in that tone she used when she was trying to talk sense into him. "You've been given an opportunity. Don't you dare waste it because you're too proud or too scared to take a chance." Margaret had always been the brave one in their relationship. She was the one who'd convinced him to leave the small town in Oklahoma, where he'd been slowly drinking himself to death after returning from Vietnam. She was the one who'd suggested they hit the road together, following music festivals and county fairs, living out of their old RV and finding joy in simple pleasures. For 23 years, they'd traveled together. Sam would play his harmonica on street corners and in small venues, while Margaret sold handmade jewelry and crafts at local markets. They'd lived paycheck to paycheck, but they'd been happy. They'd had each other, they'd had their music, and they'd had the freedom to wake up each morning and decide which direction to point their old Ford pickup truck. Then the cancer came. Sam pushed the thought away, focusing instead on Carlos's animated description of his piano teacher's cat, which apparently had a habit of walking across the keys during lessons. But the memories of Margaret were never far away, especially here in Austin, where they'd spent their last winter together. She'd wanted to see Willie Nelson perform at the famous Austin City Limits Music Festival, and despite her failing health, Sam had managed to get them tickets. They'd sat in the back, Margaret wrapped in blankets, both of them listening as Willie played songs that seemed to capture everything they'd experienced together on the road. "He understands," Margaret had whispered during Willie's performance of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, her own blue eyes bright with unshed tears. "He understands what it means to love someone and lose them and keep going anyway." Sam had agreed, though at the time he couldn't imagine how he would keep going without her. Now, 3 years later, he was beginning to understand what she'd meant. The music was what kept you moving forward when everything else felt impossible. "Mr. Sam?" Carlos's voice brought him back to the present. "You looked sad. Are you okay? Children, Sam reflected, saw everything. I'm okay, Carlos. Just thinking about someone I used to know. Someone who liked music too. Yeah, she loved music. She would have really enjoyed meeting the musician I met this morning. Carlos nodded with the serious expression children wore when they sensed adult emotions they didn't fully understand, but wanted to acknowledge anyway. As the afternoon wore on, Sam noticed an increasing number of people stopping to listen to his music. Word seemed to have spread about his encounter with Willie Nelson, and several people approached him with questions about the meeting. Robert Chen, a local music blogger who'd been documenting Austin's street musician scene, appeared with a small recording device and a request for an interview. I heard Willie Nelson stopped by this morning, Robert said, his enthusiasm barely contained. Would you mind talking about it? I think people would love to hear about that encounter. Sam considered the request. He'd always been a private person, not comfortable being the center of attention. But something about Robert's respectful approach and genuine interest in the music scene made him willing to share. It wasn't anything dramatic, Sam explained, as Robert set up his recording equipment. He heard me playing one of his songs, stopped to listen, and we talked for a few minutes. He was just normal, down to earth, the kind of person you'd enjoy having a conversation with whether you knew who he was or not. Did he say anything about your playing? Robert asked. Sam smiled, remembering. He said I played the song like I wrote it myself. That was quite a compliment coming from him. And he gave you his card? He did. Said if I was interested in playing some music together, I should give him a call. Robert's eyes widened. Are you going to call him? The question Sam had been avoiding all day hung in the air between them. I don't know, he said honestly. I'm not really a studio musician. This, he gestured to his corner of the station, this is more my style. But it's Willie Nelson, Robert said, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. Do you know how many musicians would give anything for that opportunity? Sam nodded. I imagine quite a few. But you have to understand, I'm not trying to make it big or become famous. I play music because it's what keeps me going. It's how I process the world and connect with people. Fame and recording studios, that's a different kind of music than what I do. Robert seemed to consider this, then asked, but what if playing with Willie Nelson could help you reach more people? What if it could amplify the kind of connection you're talking about? It was a thoughtful question, and Sam didn't have an immediate answer. He'd spent so many years thinking small, focusing on the immediate moment and the people right in front of him, that the idea of thinking bigger felt foreign and somewhat intimidating. As Robert packed up his equipment and promised to send Sam a copy of the interview, Dr. Thompson appeared for her evening commute. She'd been listening to Sam's music for months now, and she'd developed a theory about what made his playing so compelling. Sam, she said, after dropping her usual $1 in his case, I hope you don't mind me asking, but I've been listening to you play for several months now, and I'm curious about something. What's that, Dr. Thompson? Your music has a quality that I rarely hear, even from professional musicians. There's a kind of emotional honesty that seems to come from someplace deeper than just technical skill. Have you always played with that kind of authenticity? Sam thought about the question. I suppose I started playing that way in Vietnam. My buddy Danny, he was the one who first taught me to really play. He used to say that music wasn't about showing off how fast your fingers could move, or how many notes you could fit into a measure. He said music was about telling the truth, even when the truth was ugly or painful or didn't make sense to anybody else. Dr. Thompson nodded. That makes sense. There's actually research that shows that music created from authentic emotional experiences has a different neurological impact on listeners. It activates empathy centers in the brain more effectively than technically perfect, but emotionally distant performances. "Is that so?" Sam said, genuinely interested. He'd never thought of his music in scientific terms, but he'd always known that some performances felt more real than others. "The encounter you had with Willie Nelson this morning," Dr. Thompson continued, "I imagine he recognized that quality in your playing. Musicians at his level can usually tell the difference between someone who's playing from technique and someone who's playing from experience." As Dr. Thompson caught her train, Sam reflected on her words. Playing from experience? That described his music perfectly. Every note he played carried the weight of places he'd been, people he'd loved and lost, choices he'd made and regretted. The evening rush began to pick up, and Sam found himself playing for a different crowd than his usual morning commuters. Evening travelers often seemed more relaxed, more willing to stop and listen for a few extra minutes. Tonight, several people lingered after dropping money in his case, and Sam found himself engaged in more conversations than usual. An elderly woman named Dorothy Patterson struck up a conversation about music from the 1960s, sharing memories of dancing to songs that Sam knew by heart. A young couple, James and Sarah Mitchell, no relation, despite the shared surname, asked Sam to play something romantic for their anniversary dinner celebration. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the station floor, Sam realized that something had shifted in his day. The encounter with Willie Nelson had somehow opened a door that he hadn't even realized was closed. People were seeing him differently, approaching him with more curiosity and openness than usual. But more importantly, he was seeing himself differently. For the first time in years, he was allowing himself to consider possibilities beyond his daily routine of playing for commuters and collecting enough money for basic necessities. Maria Rodriguez appeared as her shift was ending, Carlos in tow with his backpack full of homework and leftover lunch. "How was your day, Sam?" she asked. "Still thinking about your famous visitor?" "You know, Maria," Sam said, carefully packing his harmonica in its worn leather case, "I think I am. And I think maybe that's not such a bad thing." Carlos tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Can we bring Mr. Sam dinner tomorrow? I want to hear more about the famous musician." Maria smiled at her son's enthusiasm. "We'll see, mijo. But I think Mr. Sam might be too busy to have dinner with us tomorrow." Sam looked at Maria, then at Carlos's hopeful face. "Actually," he said, surprising himself with the words, "I think I might have some phone calls to make tonight. But Carlos, I'll always have time for dinner with friends." As the Rodriguez family walked away, Carlos waving enthusiastically over his shoulder, Sam pulled Willie Nelson's business card from his wallet and looked at it in the fading light. Margaret would have called by now, he thought. She would have been on the phone before Willie's train had even left the station. For the first time all day, Sam smiled at the memory instead of feeling the familiar ache of loss. Maybe, he thought, it was time to start living more like Margaret would have wanted him to, with hope, with courage, and with the belief that good things could still happen to people who'd already lived most of their lives. He tucked the card back into his wallet, but this time it felt less like a burden and more like a promise. The next morning, Sam Mitchell woke up in his small room at the Comfort Inn on the outskirts of Austin, with Willie Nelson's business card on the nightstand beside his bed. He'd placed it there the night before after spending an hour staring at it, picking up his phone, then putting it back down again. The autumn Texas sun streamed through the thin curtains, and Sam could hear the sounds of rush-hour traffic building outside. He'd been staying at this motel for 3 months now, paying week by week from the money he made playing at Union Station. It wasn't much, but it was clean and safe. And the desk clerk, an older woman named Betty Sullivan, had grown fond of him and occasionally slipped him an extra towel or a complimentary breakfast voucher. Sam made coffee using the small machine in his room, a luxury he'd learned to appreciate after years of campfire coffee during his traveling days with Margaret. As he sipped the hot brew, he thought about the conversation he'd had with Dr. Thompson the evening before, about playing from experience versus playing from technique. The truth was, Sam had been playing from experience for so long that he'd almost forgotten there was any other way. Every song he played carried memories, some painful, some joyful, all of them real. His harmonica had been with him through the darkest periods of his life, and the brightest ones too. By 7:30 a.m., Sam was back at his familiar spot in Union Station. The morning commuters were just beginning their daily rush, and the station was filling with the sounds of announcements, conversations, and footsteps on marble floors. "Morning, Sam," Maria Rodriguez called out as she began her shift. "Sleep well." "Morning, Maria." "Well enough," Sam replied, though in truth he'd spent much of the night thinking about possibilities he hadn't considered in years. Carlos was with his mother this morning, having convinced her to let him come to work early so he could listen to Sam play before school started. The boy had become genuinely attached to the musician, and Sam found himself looking forward to these early morning visits. "Did you call the famous musician yet?" Carlos asked, with the direct curiosity that only children possessed. Sam smiled. "Not yet, Carlos, but I'm thinking about it." "What are you waiting for?" the boy asked, settling into his usual spot on the floor beside Sam's stool. It was a simple question, but it cut right to the heart of Sam's hesitation. What was he waiting for? Fear of rejection? Fear of not being good enough? Fear of stepping outside the comfortable routine he'd built for himself? "Sometimes, Carlos," Sam said, lifting his harmonica, "adults need more time to make decisions than kids do. But you're right to ask the question." Sam began his morning with a gentle version of the Tennessee Waltz, a song that always reminded him of the dance halls he and Margaret had visited during their traveling years. The melody drifted through the station, and as usual, several commuters slowed their pace to listen. Dr. Jennifer Thompson appeared earlier than usual, stopping at Sam's corner with her coffee cup in hand. "Good morning, Sam," she said. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday evening." "Oh, about what specifically?" "About authentic musical expression and its impact on listeners. I did some research last night, and I found something interesting I thought you might like to know." Sam continued playing softly while Dr. Thompson spoke, a skill he'd developed over years of busking. The ability to carry on conversations while maintaining the musical atmosphere. "There's a concept in music therapy called entrainment," she explained. "It's the idea that when someone listens to music that comes from genuine emotional experience, their own emotional state begins to synchronize with the performer's emotional state. It's why your music affects people the way it does." "You mean people feel what I'm feeling when I play?" Sam asked, pausing his performance. "In a simplified way, yes. When you play from your authentic experience, your memories, your losses, your hopes, listeners unconsciously connect with those emotions. It's part of why music is so powerful as a healing tool." Sam considered this information. "So when I play songs about missing someone, people who've lost someone might feel understood." "Exactly. And when Willie Nelson heard you playing yesterday, he was probably recognizing not just technical skill, but emotional authenticity. That's something that can't be taught. It has to be lived." As Dr. Thompson hurried to catch her train, Sam found himself thinking about the responsibility that came with playing music that affected people so deeply. If his harmonica could help people process their own emotions, didn't he have an obligation to reach as many people as possible? The morning progressed with its usual rhythm of commuters, tourists, and regular listeners. Sam played requests when people asked, shared brief conversations with those who lingered, and gradually accumulated enough money for another day's expenses. Around 10 a.m., during a lull in foot traffic, Sam noticed a familiar figure approaching. Willie Nelson walked through the station with the same easy grace he'd shown the day before, but this time, he wasn't rushing to catch a train. "Morning, Sam," Willie said, his distinctive voice carrying clearly across the space between them. "Willie," Sam replied, lowering his harmonica in surprise. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Well, I was in the neighborhood, and I got to thinking about our conversation yesterday. Wondered if you'd had time to consider my invitation." Sam felt the weight of Willie Nelson's business card in his wallet. "I've been thinking about it, yes. But I have to be honest. I'm not sure I'm the kind of musician you're looking for." Willie smiled, the same warm expression that had put Sam at ease the day before. "What kind of musician do you think I'm looking for?" "Someone professional. Someone who knows about recording studios and production and all that technical stuff. I just play what I feel and hope people connect with it." "Sam," Willie said, settling onto a nearby bench, "can I tell you something? I've been making records for over 60 years now, and I've worked with every kind of musician you can imagine. Technical experts who could play anything you put in front of them. Songwriters who could craft perfect melodies. Producers who knew every trick in the book. But you know what I've learned?" Sam shook his head, genuinely curious. "The musicians who move people the most are the ones who play what they feel and hope people connect with it. That's not amateur music, Sam. That's the purest kind of music there is." The two men sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the flow of people through the station. Sam noticed that several passers-by had recognized Willie and were trying to get closer while pretending not to stare. "Tell me about your friend," Willie said suddenly. "The one who taught you to play in Vietnam." Sam's expression softened. "Danny Rodriguez. No relation to Maria over there. He was from San Antonio. Played guitar like he was born with it in his hands. We were in the same unit, and whenever we had downtime, Danny would pull out his guitar, and I'd play harmonica. And for a few minutes, we weren't in a war zone anymore. We were just a couple of guys playing music. What happened to him? Stepped on a mine about 3 months before we were supposed to rotate home. He was trying to help a wounded soldier, and..." Sam's voice trailed off. Even after all these years, talking about Danny's death was difficult. Willie nodded with the understanding of someone who'd known many people who didn't make it home from various kinds of wars. Military conflicts, personal battles, the struggle to make it in the music business. "Danny sounds like he was a good friend," Willie said quietly. "The best. He used to say that music was a bridge between people, that when you played from your heart, you were building connections that could span any distance, any difference between people." Willie's eyes lit up at this. "That's beautiful, Sam. And you know what? He was right. Every time you play that harmonica, you're building those bridges Danny talked about." Sam looked around the station, seeing the familiar faces of commuters who'd become part of his daily routine over the past 3 months. Maria and Carlos, Dr. Thompson, the various travelers who stopped to listen and sometimes to talk. He'd been thinking of his music as a way to survive, but Willie was suggesting it was something larger. "The thing is," Willie continued, "those bridges you're building here, they could extend a lot further if you wanted them to. I'm not talking about fame or fortune or anything that changes who you are. I'm talking about reaching more people who might need to hear what you have to say through your music." "How do you mean?" Willie pulled out his phone and showed Sam a video that had been posted on social media the night before. It was Robert Chen's interview with Sam, along with footage of him playing at the station. The video had been viewed over 50,000 times and shared hundreds of times, with comments from people all over the country who were moved by Sam's story and his music. People are already connecting with your music, Sam. This video has comments from veterans, from people who've lost loved ones, from folks who just appreciate authentic music played with heart. You're already building those bridges Danny talked about. Sam stared at the phone screen, reading comments from strangers who seemed to understand something about his music that he was only beginning to understand himself. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Sam asked. "Come to my studio this afternoon. Not to record anything or make any commitments, just to play some music together. Let's see what happens when we combine your authentic emotional expression with a setting that could reach even more people." Before Sam could respond, Carlos appeared at his side, having returned from school for lunch with his mother. "Hi, Mr. Willie," the boy said, with the fearless friendliness of childhood. Willie's face lit up. "Well, hello there, young man. You must be Carlos. Your mom told me you're learning piano." "I am. Mr. Sam has been teaching me about music, too. He says the most important thing is to play what you feel." Willie glanced at Sam with a knowing smile. Mr. Sam is absolutely right about that. That's the most important lesson any musician can learn. Carlos looked back and forth between the two men, clearly sensing the importance of their conversation, even if he didn't understand all the details. "Mr. Sam," the boy said with the serious expression children wore when they had something important to say, "if Mr. Willie wants to play music with you, maybe you should do it. Mom always says that when good things happen, you should say yes." Out of the mouths of babes, Sam thought. Here was an 8-year-old boy offering wisdom that Sam's adult anxieties had been preventing him from seeing clearly. Willie extended his hand to Carlos for a formal handshake. "Carlos, that's excellent advice. Your mom raised you right." Carlos beamed with pride at the recognition from the famous musician, then looked up at Sam with expectant eyes. The boy's innocent wisdom hung in the air between the two men like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Sam felt something shift inside him, a door opening that had been closed for far too long. Margaret would have loved this moment. A child offering the kind of simple, clear advice that cut through all the adult complications and fears. "You know what, Carlos?" Sam said, making his decision in that instant. "You're absolutely right. Sometimes when good things happen, you have to be brave enough to say yes." He looked at Willie. "What time this afternoon?" Willie's smile was radiant. "How about 2 o'clock? I'll send a car to pick you up here at the station. No pressure, just two musicians sharing some music and seeing what happens." As Willie walked away, Carlos jumped up and down with excitement. "Mr. Sam, you're going to make music with a famous person." "We'll see what happens, Carlos. But you gave me some pretty good advice there." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of anticipation and nervousness. Sam continued playing for the commuters, but his mind was elsewhere, thinking about the afternoon ahead and what it might mean. At exactly 2 o'clock, a modest sedan pulled up outside Union Station. The driver, a friendly man named Marcus Washington, who'd been working with Willie for over a decade, found Sam waiting near the entrance with his harmonica case and a small bag containing a clean shirt. "Mr. Mitchell? I'm Marcus. Mr. Nelson sent me to bring you out to the studio." The drive to Pedernales' studio took them through the rolling hills west of Austin, past fields of wildflowers and clusters of live oak trees that had stood for centuries. Sam had traveled these roads before with Margaret, but seeing them now, with the knowledge that he was heading toward a musical collaboration he'd never imagined possible, made the familiar landscape seem new and full of promise. "First time working with Willie?" Marcus asked as they drove. "First time working with anyone in a studio," Sam replied honestly. "I'm more of a street corner musician." Marcus chuckled. "Don't let that worry you. Willie's recorded with everyone from opera singers to punk rockers. He's got a gift for making people feel comfortable and bringing out their best. The studio itself was smaller and more intimate than Sam had expected. Built on Willie's ranch, it had the feeling of a comfortable living room rather than a sterile professional facility. Gold records lined the walls alongside family photos and memorabilia from decades of touring and recording. Willie greeted Sam at the door, dressed in his usual casual style, jeans, a comfortable shirt, and his ever-present bandana. "Sam, glad you decided to come out. How was the drive?" "Beautiful country out here," Sam replied, looking around the studio with interest. "This feels more like a home than a workplace." "That's exactly what it's supposed to feel like. Music should come from a place of comfort and authenticity, not from trying to impress anyone or meet someone else's expectations." Willie introduced Sam to the other musicians who'd be joining them for the afternoon session. Tommy Rodriguez on bass, no relation to Danny or Maria, though Sam noted the coincidence, and Paul "Trigger" Thompson on drums. Both were seasoned professionals who'd worked with Willie for years and had a reputation for being able to adapt to any musical style. "So, Sam," Willie said as they settled into the comfortable chairs arranged in a circle, "why don't you start by playing something that means something to you? Don't worry about us. Just play like you're back at the station." Sam lifted his harmonica, closed his eyes, and began to play "Amazing Grace." It was a song that had carried him through some of his darkest moments, both in Vietnam and during the years after Margaret's death. As the notes filled the studio, he could feel the other musicians listening not just to the melody, but to the emotions underneath it. When the song ended, the silence in the room was profound. "Beautiful," Willie said quietly. "Tell me about that song. What does it mean to you?" Sam opened his eyes and looked around at the three men who were waiting patiently for his answer. "It's the song my buddy Danny was humming when he died. And it's the song Margaret asked me to play for her during her last days. It's about finding grace in the hardest moments, about believing that there's something good waiting on the other side of pain." Willie nodded with deep understanding. "Tommy, can you find that in the key of G?" Tommy adjusted his bass and found a simple, supportive rhythm that complemented Sam's harmonica without overpowering it. Paul added a gentle brush pattern on the drums that sounded like rain on leaves. When Sam played "Amazing Grace" again, this time with musical companions, the song seemed to expand and deepen, carrying even more emotional weight. "Now that," Willie said when they finished, "is what music is supposed to sound like. Not perfect, but real. Not polished, but honest." They spent the next hour exploring different songs, with Willie suggesting melodies and the other musicians finding their way into Sam's musical world. Sam played "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain" again, the song that had first caught Willie's attention. But this time, Willie joined in with his distinctive guitar style and vocals. The collaboration felt natural and unforced, like four old friends sitting around a campfire sharing songs. Sam found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't expected, his initial nervousness replaced by the joy of making music with skilled and sympathetic partners. "Sam," Willie said during a break, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. What would you say if I told you I'd like to record a few of these songs with you?" Sam's first instinct was to decline, to retreat to the safety of his familiar routine. But then he remembered Carlos's advice about saying yes when good things happen, and Dr. Thompson's insights about the healing power of authentic music. "I'd say I'm honored, but I'd want to know what you have in mind. I'm not looking to become a professional musician or change my whole life." Willie smiled. "What I have in mind is exactly what we just did. You playing your music with heart and soul, us supporting you in a way that brings out the best in what you're already doing. No pressure to tour or become famous or do anything that doesn't feel right to you. And what would happen to these recordings? That would be up to you. We could keep them private, just for the joy of making them. Or we could share them with people who might benefit from hearing them. Veterans, people who've experienced loss, folks who appreciate authentic music. The choice would be yours. Sam thought about the video Robert Chen had posted, about the thousands of people who had responded to his story and his music. He thought about Danny's belief that music was a bridge between people, and about Margaret's encouragement to always be open to new possibilities. "Can I think about it overnight?" Sam asked. "Of course. But Sam, I want you to know that working with you this afternoon has reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. It's been a privilege." As Marcus drove Sam back to Union Station, the older musician found himself processing the events of the afternoon. The collaboration had felt natural and meaningful in ways he hadn't expected. More importantly, it had felt like an extension of what he was already doing rather than a departure from it. Back at the station, the evening commuters were beginning their journey home. Sam took his usual spot and began to play. But something had changed. The music felt bigger somehow, enriched by the afternoon's collaboration, but still authentically his own. Dr. Thompson appeared for her evening commute and immediately noticed a difference in Sam's playing. "Sam, there's something different about your music tonight. It has the same emotional authenticity as always, but there's an added dimension, a richness that wasn't there this morning." Sam smiled. "I spent the afternoon playing with some other musicians. It reminded me that music is meant to be shared, not just performed. May I ask who you played with?" "Willie Nelson and his band, at his studio." Dr. Thompson's eyes widened. "And how was that experience?" "Honestly, it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before." As the evening progressed, Sam found himself playing with a new sense of possibility. The bridges Danny had talked about building through music suddenly seemed not just metaphorical, but tangible and real. Maria Rodriguez appeared as her shift ended, with Carlos in tow as usual. "How did it go with the famous musician?" Maria asked. "It went well," Sam replied. "Really well. Carlos, I want to thank you for the advice you gave me this morning. Sometimes adults need children to remind them how to be brave." Carlos beamed with pride. "Are you going to be famous now, Mr. Sam?" Sam laughed. "I don't think so, Carlos. But I might be able to help more people through my music. And that's even better than being famous." As the Rodriguez family walked away, Sam began to pack up his harmonica for the day. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to tomorrow not just as another day of survival, but as another day of possibility. The evening air was crisp and clear, and as Sam walked back to his motel, he could hear the distant sound of live music drifting from one of Austin's many venues. The city was alive with music, and for the first time since arriving 3 months ago, Sam felt like he truly belonged to that musical community. That night, as he placed Willie Nelson's business card back on his nightstand, Sam knew that tomorrow would bring a phone call that would change his life. But unlike the previous night, the prospect didn't fill him with anxiety. Instead, it filled him with something he hadn't felt in years: excitement about what the future might hold. 3 days later, Sam Mitchell stood in Willie Nelson's studio with his harmonica, surrounded by recording equipment and the quiet energy that came from creating something meaningful. They'd spent 2 sessions together, recording 5 songs that captured the essence of Sam's street corner performances while showcasing the power of collaborative music making. The songs they'd chosen told a story: Amazing Grace for healing and hope, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain for love and loss, On the Road Again, reimagined as a veteran's journey home, a traditional folk song called Wayfaring Stranger that spoke to Sam's years of wandering, and an original composition Willie had written based on their conversations, titled The Bridges We Build. "I think we've got something special here, Sam," Willie said, listening to the playback of their final song. "The question is, what do you want to do with it?" Sam had been thinking about this question for 3 days. The recording process had been everything Willie had promised, respectful of Sam's musical style, while enhancing it through thoughtful collaboration. But more importantly, it had shown Sam that his music could reach people in ways he'd never imagined. "I keep thinking about something my friend Danny used to say," Sam replied. "That music was a bridge between people. These recordings, they feel like bridges too. Bridges between my past and my future. Between street performance and studio collaboration. Between my story and other people's stories." Willie nodded. "So, what do you want to do with these bridges?" "I want to share them. Not for money or fame, but because I think they might help people the way music has helped me." That afternoon, they made a plan. The recordings would be released as a small independent album titled Bridges, with all proceeds going to organizations that supported veterans and their families. Sam would continue playing at Union Station. That wouldn't change. But he'd also be available for small venue performances and music therapy sessions when his schedule allowed. More importantly, Willie had arranged for Sam to connect with other street musicians and veterans who used music as a form of healing and expression. The idea was to create a network of musicians who could support each other and share their stories through their art. 2 weeks later, on a crisp November morning, Union Station was buzzing with unusual activity. Word had spread through social media that Willie Nelson would be joining Sam Mitchell for a special performance at 10 a.m., with all donations going to the local Veterans Support Center. Sam arrived at his usual spot to find a crowd of several hundred people gathered around the area where he normally played. Camera crews from local news stations had set up equipment, and reporters were interviewing early arrivals about why they'd come to hear the performance. "Nervous?" Willie asked as they prepared to begin. "A little," Sam admitted. "This is a lot bigger than what I'm used to." "Just remember," Willie said, "we're not performing for the cameras or the crowd. We're playing for the same reason you've been playing here every day for months, to connect with people through music. The only difference is that today, we're connecting with more people at once." Carlos Rodriguez had convinced his school to let him attend the performance as an educational field trip, and he waved enthusiastically at Sam from his spot in the front row, sitting next to his mother, Maria. Dr. Thompson was there too, along with many of the commuters who'd become part of Sam's daily routine over the past months. Robert Chen was documenting everything for his music blog, and Betty from the motel had closed the front desk for an hour to come hear Sam play with Willie Nelson. "Before we begin," Willie announced to the crowd, "I want to tell you about my friend Sam Mitchell. 3 weeks ago, I was passing through this station and heard the most authentic, emotionally honest music I'd encountered in years. Sam's been playing here every morning for months, not seeking fame or fortune, but simply sharing his music and connecting with people who needed to hear it." He gestured to Sam, who stepped forward with his harmonica. Sam is a Vietnam veteran who's spent his life understanding that music can heal wounds, build bridges between strangers, and remind us of our shared humanity. Today, we're not just performing together. We're celebrating the power of authentic music to bring people together. They began with amazing grace, and as Sam's harmonica filled the station with its clear, pure notes, the crowd fell silent. Willie's guitar joined in, then his voice, creating a sound that seemed to transform the busy transit hub into something approaching a cathedral. The performance that followed was unlike anything Sam had ever experienced. Each song was met with reverent attention from the audience. And between songs, Willie shared stories about Sam's music and its impact on the people who'd heard it over the past months. When they played The Bridges We Build, Willie's original composition inspired by their friendship, there wasn't a dry eye in the station. The song spoke about unexpected meetings, the courage to reach across differences, and the way music could connect people across generations, backgrounds, and experiences. But the moment that would be remembered longest came when they finished their planned set. And Carlos Rodriguez raised his small hand in the air. "Mr. Sam," the boy called out, "can you play the railroad song? The one you taught me?" Sam smiled and looked at Willie, who nodded encouragingly. "You know what, Carlos? I think we can do that." What happened next was pure magic. As Sam began playing "I've Been Working on the Railroad," other musicians in the crowd, and there were many in Austin, began joining in. Someone had brought a guitar, another person had a fiddle, and several people began singing along. The impromptu finale turned Union Station into a giant music hall, with hundreds of people singing and clapping along to a simple folk song. Led by a street musician and country music legend who had found friendship in the most unexpected place. The video of that moment, captured by dozens of phones and cameras, would eventually be viewed by millions of people around the world. But for Sam, the most important moment came when the song ended, and he saw the faces of the people who had been part of his daily routine for months. Maria and Carlos, Dr. Thompson, Betty from the motel, and dozens of commuters who had become, without him realizing it, his community. "Thank you," he said into Willie's microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the station. "3 months ago, I came to Austin with nothing but my harmonica and the hope that playing music might help me make it through another day. What I found here was something I hadn't expected. A community of people who understood that music isn't just entertainment, it's connection." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "My friend Danny used to say that music was a bridge between people. Today, all of you helped prove that he was right. Thank you for letting me be part of your community." The applause that followed was thunderous, but it gradually gave way to something even more meaningful. Individual people approaching Sam to share their own stories, to thank him for his music, and to tell him how his daily performances had impacted their lives. Dr. Thompson waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching. "Sam, I hope you realize what you've accomplished here. You've created something that goes beyond music. You've created a community centered around authentic human connection." "I couldn't have done it alone," Sam replied, gesturing to Willie, who was signing autographs and talking with fans. "Sometimes it takes meeting the right person at the right moment to help you see possibilities you didn't know existed." As the afternoon wound down and the station returned to its normal rhythm, Sam found himself back in his familiar corner. But everything had changed. The Bridges album would be released the following month, with advance orders already numbering in the thousands. More importantly, Sam had received invitations to perform at veteran centers, music therapy programs, and small venues throughout Texas. But, perhaps most significantly, he'd connected with a network of musicians who, like him, used their art as a form of healing and community building. The bridges Danny had talked about weren't just metaphorical, they were real connections between real people who had found each other through the power of authentic music. Willie approached as Sam was packing up his harmonica for the day. "So, how does it feel to be a recording artist?" Sam laughed. "Honestly, it feels like I'm still the same person I was this morning, just with more opportunities to share music with people who might need to hear it." "That's the perfect attitude," Willie said. "And Sam, this is just the beginning. The bridges you've been building through your music, they're going to reach places you never imagined." As Willie walked away, Carlos Rodriguez appeared one last time, having convinced his mother to let him say goodbye before they went home. "Mr. Sam," the boy said, with the serious expression he wore when he had something important to say, "are you still going to play here every morning?" "Every morning that I'm in town, Carlos. This is where it all started. and this is where I want to keep building bridges." Carlos smiled and gave Sam an unexpected hug. "I'm proud of you for saying yes to good things." That evening, as Sam walked back to his motel, he passed a young woman playing guitar on a street corner downtown. On impulse, he stopped and listened for a few minutes, then dropped a $5 bill in her case. "Beautiful music," he said. "Keep playing from your heart." The woman looked up and recognized him from the day's news coverage. "You're Sam Mitchell, the harmonica player who performed with Willie Nelson today." "I'm just a musician, same as you," Sam replied. "We're all building bridges through our music, one song at a time." As he continued his walk home, Sam could hear the distant sound of live music drifting from venues throughout Austin. The city's musical community had welcomed him, and now he was part of something larger than himself. A network of artists committed to using their talents to heal, connect, and inspire. That night, as he placed his harmonica on the nightstand beside Willie Nelson's business card, which he'd decided to keep as a reminder of how life could surprise you, Sam thought about Danny Rodriguez and Margaret, and how they would have loved to see this day. The bridges Danny had talked about building through music weren't just connections between performer and audience. They were connections between past and future, between loss and hope, between the person he'd been when he arrived in Austin 3 months ago and the person he was becoming. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new people to connect with, and new bridges to build. But tonight, Sam Mitchell fell asleep to the sound of music drifting through his window, grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought him home to a place he'd never been before, surrounded by a community he'd never imagined he could belong to. The last thing he thought before sleep took him was Danny's voice, carried on the evening breeze. "Music is a bridge between people, Sam. Keep building those bridges." And in the morning, he would do exactly that.